Let's bring her to the stage, ladies and gentlemen, Judy O.
Hi, everybody. Every fall, my husband Ted and I spend a few weeks in Manhattan. And we stay on the Upper West Side, and we're a couple blocks from this really nice little venue called Symphony Space. And they have all kinds of performing arts there. They have music and dance and film, and they have fundraisers, and one of their fundraisers is called Artful Dining. And what that is a private dinner party in a private residence in Manhattan. And it features a special somebody who is known in the arts, and they usually put on some sort of presentation. And while we were there, there was one of these dining opportunities, and it featured a guy named Chip Kidd. And I never heard of him, so I Googled him. And turns out he's a graphic artist, and he designed the book jacket for Jurassic Park. He's written a couple books, and I read some more about him. And turns out that he's around my age. He grew up in Pennsylvania. I grew up in Pennsylvania. He went to Penn State. I partied at Penn State. And I thought this would be really cool to meet a successful artist who's made it in Manhattan. The date comes around. My husband and I, we go to the address. It's on the Upper East Side. And we're greeted by the hostess, this tall woman about in her 70s. She had this pixie haircut and these big beads and big earrings and this skirt with these big pleats that kind of went all over the place, and she says, "Welcome." So we came into what looked like a series of rooms that it looked like a museum. The ceilings were really high, and there was artwork all over, huge canvases and statues, and the only thing that made it look like a home, there were couches and places for people to sit. So my husband was admiring a painting, and he said, "This is stunning." And everybody in the room stared at us, and they blinked, and they said nothing. So we thought, okay, you're not supposed to really notice anything. So then we hear our hostess at the door, and she says, "Morley is here." So my husband and I say, like, "Oh, what, like Morley Safer from 60 Minutes?" So in walks Morley Safer from 60 Minutes, and his wife, and the missus. So then the rest of the guests arrived, including Chip Kidd. He was adorable. He had a bow tie and red hair and cool glasses, and he looked quirky and fun, and I was excited to meet him and talk with him. Excuse me. So then our hostess rings a little bell and announces it's time for dinner. And then she proceeds to tell us the seating arrangement. Well, Ted and I are not going to be at the same table. There's 3 different tables. And I thought, okay, mix it up a little. I can deal with that. So I go in the dining room, and I'm looking around, and oddly, there were little containers as decoration of candy corn on the tables. And I just thought it just seemed really out of place for that apartment. Then I looked at the table where my name tag was, and I see next to me a guy named Tom Meehan was supposed to sit there. He's a writer, and turns out he wrote the stage production for Annie. Wow. And then on my right is a guy who's introduced to me as a clothing store owner. Turns out he makes custom suits for Elton John and Jay-Z. And across from me, Chip Kidd's gonna sit. And I'm like, oh, this is really cool. He's gonna be across from me, we're gonna talk, we're gonna be best buds, I'm gonna make him laugh, this is gonna be great. I'm looking forward to this. And Morley's a couple seats down, and I'm realizing I am at the A table. I am with all the somebodies here. And Ted was behind me at some table with all the somebody's spouses and partners and significant others. So everybody's seated, and I start talking to Chip, and I say, I grew up not far from where you did, and I've been to your town, and he says, well, what do you do? And I said, well, I'm a graphic artist of sorts myself, and sometimes I get paid for my work. And he says, you know, you're sitting next to Tom Meehan, and he wrote Annie. And then he starts talking to Tom, and he says, I am a big fan. I've read all of your stuff, and you are just wonderful, and gush, 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 gush. And, okay, well, then it's time for him to do his presentation. So he starts talking about his experiences in the publishing field, and it was pretty interesting. He talks about one of his professors early on in college gave him some advice that he uses to this day in his work, and that was pretty interesting. And he sits down, and I said, you know, I really liked what your professor told you when you were, you know, talking about back when you were in college, and blah, 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 la, 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 and words are coming out of my mouth, and he's looking at me, and I'm looking at him, and words are coming out, and I see suddenly his jaw go slack, and his eyes go dead, and he, with great trauma, puts his elbow on the table and leans his head into his hand, and then he leans forward, and he sneers and says, "Who are you?" Suddenly, like, I'm still looking at his eyes, and he's through a tunnel, like there's his eyes at the end, and the words, "Who are you? Who are you? Who are you?" Like these big, scary cartoon words, and to say I was stunned would have been an understatement. And it was one of those moments where days and weeks and months after the fact, I'm thinking, oh, I wish I said this, I wish I said that. And I think back on that time, in my fantasy, I say, who am I? Well, I'm someone who will see to it that you never work in this town again. Who am I? Who am I? I'm your worst nightmare. More often it was, who am I? Who am I? Who are you, you rude, ignorant cunt? But in the moment, all that came to me is I took a little container of candy corn and I pushed it towards him and I said, have you tried the candy corn? Well, that was pretty much the end of my dinner conversation. And I thought, oh my God, I wonder, like, how's Ted doing? And I turn and I look back, and at his table, heads were flying back with peals of laughter, and glasses were clinking, and forks were popping. He was clearly at a different party than I was. So I played with my food until it was finally time to get up from the table. And Ted says, hey, let's hang out and have a couple more drinks. I said, no, I gotta get out of here. Of course, I needed to use a bathroom first, so I'm looking around. I don't see any place where there'd be a bathroom. In fact, I realize that I don't even see a kitchen. I don't even know where the food came from. But I go up to the server, and I asked the server, do you know where the bathroom is? And she says, I think it's that door over there. So I walk to the door, turn it, I push it open, boom, it's jammed shut. So I almost walked in on Morley Safer peeing. We hightailed it back to our little hovel on the west side, and I immediately went on my computer and I Googled Chip Kid asshole. Because I just kind of wanted some dirt on him. And nothing really came up, but he's written a couple books, so I went on Amazon and I looked at his 1-star reviews, and so there were some readers that were not happy with his work, and I was pleased about that. And it's that incident happened over a year ago, and back then I was really mortified. But over time, it's come to just be a comic tale. But I do think about, the question he posed: who am I? Who am I? And I've thought about it, and one thing I am not is someone who would ever, ever, ever treat anybody the way he did that night. And who I am, I'm a really, really proud mom of 2 beautiful young adult children who I've encouraged to be no more and no less than who they are and to listen to their own voice. And I'm a really proud wife of over 27 years to a man who I still really, really like. He's my best friend and he's my hero. I have many creative outlets and I approach all of them with great passion, and I am famous for none of them. And for the things that I am and the things that I'm not, I'm thankful.